Okay. So in the last class, we were reading the chapter, The New Dress. Does anyone remember how much we had read? Uh, this is about a lady called Mabel who's got a dress still stitched by her tailor. She chose the design, the cloth, the lace, and everything. But when she actually wore the dress, she did not feel comfortable. She did not feel confident. And she thought everyone is looking at me. I'm not, I'm, she felt like an odd one out there. And she thought everyone is making fun of me and they're talking about me. And then what happened was she felt full of anguish and helplessness and low self-esteem. And here, if you remember, she was comparing herself to a fly. Okay. I think we had read this when she was glad that Miss Milan was also feeling less confident. So it made Mabel feel better about herself. Right? Now the whole thing had vanished. The dress, the room, the love, the pity, the scrolloping looking glass, and the canary's cage all had vanished. And here she was in a corner of Mrs. Dalway's drawing room, suffering tortures, woken wide awake to reality. So everything around her seemed to vanish. But it was all so paltry, weak-blooded, and petty-minded to care so much at her age with 2 children and to be so utterly dependent on people's opinions and not have principles or convictions. Not to be able to say as other people said, there's Shakespeare, there's death, we're all weevils in a captain's biscuit, or whatever was that people say. So she felt bad about the fact that even at this age, she had 2 children and she was a certain age, she still bothered about what people said. She wished she had that strength of personality to be able to say, I don't care. This is how it is, the way other people treat such situations. She faced herself straight in the glass. She pecked at her right shoulder. She issued out into the room as if spears were being thrown. We've read this. Okay. We read this portion and then, yes, how if Charles had complimented her, she would have felt better about herself, but he didn't. And he just made her feel worse about herself. All that he said was, Mabel's got a new dress. He didn't say whether she looked nice in it, pretty in it, or anything positive. He just said she's got a dress. And that bothers her and upsets her again. Right? We had read till here. Then Mrs. Holman, seeing her standing there, bore down upon her. Of course, a thing like a dress was beneath Miss Holman's notice, with her family always tumbling downstairs or having the scarlet fever. What is scarlet fever? It's one more high class infection, which sore throat, fever. So she was always complaining that her family is down with viral. What we call viral today, probably in those days was called scarlet fever. Could Mabel tell her if Elmthorpe was ever let for August and September? Oh, it was a conversation that bored her unutterably. It made her furious to be treated like an house agent or a messenger boy, to be made use of, not to have value. That was it, she thought, trying to grasp something hard, something real, while she tried to answer sensibly about the bathroom and the south aspect and the hot water to be to the top of the house. All the time she could see little bits of her yellow dress in the round looking glass that made them all the size of boot buttons or tadpoles. So there's a mirror at the back in which people can be seen as very tiny buttons or tadpoles. Even in that mirror, she's able to spot her yellow dress, and that's all she can think about. When Mrs. Holman doesn't say anything about her dress, that also Mabel is not comfortable with. She's like, why is she not commenting on my dress? And Mabel is so sure that she also doesn't approve of her dress. It was amazing to think how much humiliation and agony and self-loathing and effort and passionate ups and downs of feeling were contained in a thing the size of a 3-penny bit. So even a small mirror in which she's visible of the size of a button, even that bothers her. Look at the amount of low self-esteem that she has. She's so sure she's looking bad, she's looking ugly, she's looking not dressed for the occasion. And that is what everything, everywhere she looks, every person she talks to, she thinks they are all confirming what she's thinking. And what was still odder, this thing, this Mabel worrying, was separate, quite disconnected. And though Mrs. Holman, the black button, was leaning forward and telling her how her eldest boy had strained his heart running, she could see her too, quite detached in the looking glass, and it was impossible that the black dot, leaning forward, gesticulating is movement, gestures, making gestures with hands, should make the yellow dot, sitting solitary, self-centered, feel what the black dot was feeling. Yet they pretended. So even now, she's not focusing on what Mrs. Holman is telling her. She's still thinking about the dress, about herself being alone, self-centered, solitary, away from everyone else. So impossible to keep boys quiet. That was the kind of thing one said. So she's like, why is this person going on and on about her boys? She can just say that the boys don't ever keep quiet. They're so noisy. And Mrs. Holman, who could never get enough sympathy and snatched what little that was there was greedily, as if it were her right, but she deserved much more, for there was a little girl who had come down this morning with a swollen knee joint, took this miserable offering and looked at it suspiciously, grudgingly, as if it were a halfpenny when it ought to have been a pound, and put it away in her purse, must put up with it, mean and miserly though it was, times being hard, so very hard. So basically what she's saying is, Miss Holman tries to tell people how miserable she is and you should give her a lot of sympathy, but people only give her a little bit of sympathy. So whatever little sympathy she gets, she values it, even though she thinks she deserves a lot more sympathy, because just this morning, her little girl had got hurt in the knee and her knee joint was swollen. And on she went, creaking, injured Mrs. Holman about the girl with swollen joints. It was tragic, this greed, this clamor for human beings, like a row of cormorants. Cormorants is large diving seabirds, barking and flapping their words for sympathy. So Mrs. Holman kept talking about the challenges, the problems that she and her family have been facing, just for some sympathy from her listeners. She says her desperation for sympathy was almost tragic. One could have felt it and not merely pretended to feel it. So she sounded so miserable that people actually not just felt sympathy for her, they actually pitied her. But in her yellow dress tonight, she could not wring out one drop more. She wanted it all for herself. So, but today, Mabel had no sympathy to give. Why? Because she thought she deserved all the sympathy. She had no sympathy to give to Mrs. Holman. Today, she was the miserable one. She was the upset one. She was the one who deserved all the sympathy and pity. She knew, she kept on looking into the glass, dipping into that dreadfully showing up blue pool, that she was condemned, despite left like this in a backwater because of her being this a feeble, vacillating creature. And it seemed to her that the yellow dress was a penance which she had deserved. And if she had been dressed like Rose Shaw in lovely clinging green with a muffle of swan's down, she would have deserved that. So then she finally reaches the conclusion that I deserve this as penance. Penance is punishment for wrongdoing.
तपश्चर्या तपश्चर्या
Right? So, tapasya karna kisi cheez ke liye. When you think you've done something wrong, you have to penance for it, right? So she says, even if I was wearing the green gown that Rose Shaw is wearing, I would still have to go through this humiliation. Why? Because it's my penance. But it was not her fault altogether after all. She says, it's not my fault. This had to be. I had to go through this. This was being one of a family of 10, never having enough money enough, always skimping and tearing, and her mother carrying great cans, and the linoleum worn on the stair edges, and one sordid little domestic tragedy after another. Nothing catastrophic. The ship farm failing, but not utterly. Her eldest brother marrying beneath him, but not very much. There was no romance, nothing extreme about them at all. So what is the penance about? For being from a very basic family where they were always poor, they did not have enough, and there were never major, catastrophic, life-changing, damaging problems in their lives. But yes, they had problems. Like they had a sheep farm that did not completely fail, but it failed. They had a brother who married beneath his status, though not very below his status. So they were always in that range of that deserved sympathy. She says there was no romance, nothing extreme about them at all. Being extremely poor or extremely rich is romantic, right? That is what gets people's attention, sympathy, but there was nothing extreme about Mabel or her life. They petered out respectably in seaside resorts. Every watering place had one of her aunts, even now, asleep in some lodging with the front windows not quite facing the sea. So her family would go to resorts, but they were not very expensive and fancy resorts. There also, the rooms that they were booked would not be facing the sea, but some other rooms which are relatively cheaper because they are not facing the sea. That was so like them. They had to squint at things always. So that means they were always trying to save money. Like not buying a lodging with front windows facing the sea. They would choose a room which is not facing the sea so that They can get it at a cheaper rate. And she had done the same. She was just like her aunts. What had she done? She was also trying to save pennies all her life. For all her dreams of living in India, married to some hero like Sir Henry Lawrence, some builder, still the sight of a native in a turban filled her with romance. She had failed utterly. And why had she failed? Because she had not married a sir or an empire builder, but she had married Hooper with his safe, permanent underling's job at the law courts, and they managed tolerably in a smallish house without proper maids and hash when she was alone or just bread and butter. But now and then, Mrs. Holman was off, thinking her the most dried up, unsympathetic twig she had ever met, absurdly dressed too, and would tell everyone about Maple's fantastic appearance. So she said she's been living a very basic life. She's married this person. She calls him an underling. That means he's not very successful or very famous or a go-getter. He's just making things work. So sometimes they would just have bread and butter and no proper maids. It's not a small house, it's a smallish house. So it's not very small, but it's not really a big house. So she calls it a smallish house. And her life is tolerable, not comfortable, right? Not posh, not liberal, but not poor as well. So she calls it a tolerable life. She says she's been through so much, and all Mrs. Holman can think of that why is Mabel not offering me any sympathy? How come she's so unsympathetic? And so this is Mabel thinking in her own mind. Nobody has said this to her. So she thinks Mrs. Holman must be thinking I'm unsympathetic and I'm also absurdly dressed. We know her obsession with her yellow dress, right? She thinks she's not looking good. So the whole chapter is in Mabel's mind. Very few incidents actually occur outside her mind. So it's a lot of okay. And would tell everyone about Mabel's fantastic appearance now and then, thought Mabel's worrying, left alone on the blue sofa, punching the cushion in order to look occupied, for she would not join Charles Burt and Rose Shaw, chattering like magpies and perhaps laughing at her by the fireplace. And then there did come to her delicious moments, reading the other night in bed, for instance, or down by the sea on the sand in the sun at Easter. Let her recall it, a great tuft of pale sand grass standing all twisted like a shock of spears against the sky, which was blue like a smooth china egg, so firm, so hard, and then the melody of the waves. Hush, hush, they said, and the children's shouts paddling. Yes, it was a divine moment, and there she lay. She felt in the hands of the goddess who was the world. Rather a hard-hearted but very beautiful goddess, a little lamb laid on the altar. One did think these silly things, and it didn't matter so long as one never said them. So she says it's okay to think of all these things as long as you don't say it aloud. She says that she hopes that there is a day when during lunch, for no reason, suddenly she says, this is it. This is it. This has happened. Right? And she's like, I can just snap out of it. The other way about it was equally surprising. That is, everything was arranged: music, weather, holidays, every reason for happiness was there. So, this is also going on in her head again. Her wretched self, again, no doubt. She had always been a fretful, weak, unsatisfactory mother, a wobbly wife, lolling about in a kind of twilight existence with nothing very clear or very bold, or more one thing than another, like all her brothers and sisters, except perhaps Herbert. They were all the same poor, water-veined creatures who did nothing. So this is her self-esteem. She says that, like her brothers, she says water-veined. That means we have no guts, we have no backbone, we have no spirit, we have no fire. We are all very mediocre, very basic people. She says, I've always been a fretful, weak, unsatisfactory mother. So I've not been a good mother. I've not been satisfactory at being a mother. I have not been effective as a mother. This is her assessment of herself. A wobbly wife. That means not very supportive, not there for her husband, an unreliable, moody. She says, I'm just existing. I'm not living. She says, in the same way, all my brothers and sisters, except perhaps Herbert, who's a stronger person, all of us are the same. We are the same poor, water-veined creatures who did nothing. So she says, we don't have the strength of character, we don't have the will or the ability, and we have never really done anything. She says, who did nothing. So she believes she has done nothing all her life. See how harsh she is with herself. She's a mother, she's a wife, and yet this is what she thinks of her contribution to the family. So obviously, when she goes to a gathering with such low self-esteem, she is going to torture herself, punish herself, think so lowly of herself, and then torture herself the way she does with all those negative thoughts. Then in the midst of this creeping, crawling life, creeping, crawling, who creeps and crawls? Insects. So basically what she's saying is कि कीड़े मकोड़ों की लाइफ में जी रही थी, and I tried to come and arrive at this party. She says, in the midst of this creeping, crawling life, suddenly I was on the crest of a wave. So there's an insect who's on a wave, and the wave takes the insect high. So she calls this party a crest of a wave. She says, because of this wave, I ended up somewhere I did not belong. That wretched fly, where had she read the story that kept coming to her mind about the fly and the saucer? Struggled out. She doesn't even remember where she'd read the story, and suddenly she was thinking of herself as this insect. Yes, she had those moments. But now that she was 40, they might come more and more seldom. She thought, okay, I might have had low self-esteem when I was younger, but now I'm 40. Now I should not get these ideas so frequently. By degrees, she would cease to struggle anymore. But that was deplorable. That was not to be endured. That made her feel ashamed of herself. So if she stopped struggling, that meant that she has accepted her fate. So वो भी उसको गवारा नहीं है. That also she's not okay with. She would go to the London Library tomorrow. She would find some wonderful, helpful, astonishing book quite by chance, a book by a clergyman, by an American no one had heard of, or she would walk down the Strand and drop accidentally into the hall where a miner was telling about the life in the pit, and suddenly she would become a new person. So now she decides that I'm going to do something different tomorrow. I'll probably pick up a book, different book, and I'm going to read it, or I'm going to walk and I'm going to end up in this hall where somebody's talking about his life, and that interaction will transform me. She would be absolutely transformed. She would wear a uniform. She would be called Sister Somebody. So all her life, all she longs for is to be someone, to be somebody. Till today, she feels like a nobody. She says here, she says, we did nothing. That means she thinks she's a nobody. She's not a good mother. She's not a good wife. She's not, there's nothing interesting or valuable about her. So there is. And what does she long for? She longs to be somebody. She says somebody is going to call me Sister Somebody. She would never give a thought to clothes again. She says, I'm going to be this person, and it doesn't matter what I'm wearing. My clothes will not be so important. And right now they're important because I have nothing else to offer. Once I have some qualities to offer, I will be, nobody will bother about my clothes because they will be more busy being impressed with my personality. And ever after, she would be perfectly clear about Charles Burt and Miss Milan and this room and that room. And it was always day after day as if she were lying in the sun or carving the mutton. It would be it. So she longs for a time when she's somebody, she's comfortable being around people, and she's completely at ease wherever she is. And Charles and Miss Milan and this room and that room and all these people, their presence will no longer bother her. So she got up from the blue sofa, and the yellow button in the looking glass got up too. Because if she got up, then the yellow button in the looking glass, she's calling herself the yellow button. So obviously her reflection also got up. She waved her hand to Charles and Rose to show them she did not depend on one scrap. And the yellow button moved out of the looking glass, and all the spears were gathered into her breast as she walked towards Mrs. Dolby and said, "Good night." So she got up, she put up a brave front. She waved to Rose and Charles to say, "I don't care if you don't approve of my dress." And then, gathering all the spears, all her pain, all her hurt, she walks to Mrs. Dolby and she says, "Good night." "But it's too early to go," said Mrs. Dolby, who was always so charming. "I'm afraid I must," said Mabel, worrying. But she added in her weak, wobbly voice, which only sounded ridiculous when she tried to strengthen it, "I've enjoyed myself enormously. I have enjoyed myself," she said to Mrs. Dolby, whom she met on the stairs. Lies, lies, lies. So she tries to tell the host that I'm leaving early, but I enjoyed myself. And what does her inner voice say? Lies, 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 she said to herself going downstairs. And right in the saucer, she said to herself as she thanked Mrs. Barnett for helping her and wrapped herself round and round and round in the Chinese cloak she had worn these 20 years. So she lied to Mr. Dolby while leaving, and she lied to Mrs. Dolby that she enjoyed herself. Then she told Mr. Dolby the same thing. And then when she thanked Mrs. Barnett, when she didn't feel like thanking her, she again realized how she was living a lie, how she was being untruthful. She was not sharing her real feelings. So nobody outside can see that, but inside her head, someone shouting at her, lies, 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 that you're not being yourself. You're lying to the world, right? This is not you. So it gets so difficult to lead a life which is to be two people, to be something else on the inside and something else on the outside. It gets very stressful for the person involved, right? Okay, let's come to the questions at the end of the text. Narrate in your own words the picture imagined by Mabel as she thinks of herself in a party as a fly at the edge of the saucer. So, let me show you. Okay, so I don't think I can show you something with a fly, but imagine this is a cup and saucer and there's a fly here. You see the spider here, but there's a fly here. So fly is a dirty thing on a cup of tea, coffee, whatever you're having, right? Nobody likes seeing a fly on a cup. So here or here, right? So that is how Mabel thinks of herself, that these are these elite people, these rich, polished, respected, well-groomed people who belong, and I'm like a fly in their cup or their saucer, right? Something like this, right? Imagine a fly inside a cup. People hate that, right? People are repulsed by that. People are like, gee, right? So imagine how she's thinking of herself. She's describing herself. Here, look at this cup, and there is this fly in this cup of tea. How do you feel if you're drinking this and you see a fly? You're like, oh my God, yeah, gee, isko feko, right? So she's thinking of herself so in such a lowly manner. So what you have to do is you have to narrate in your own words this whole picture of how Mabel thinks of herself as a fly at the edge of the saucer. This fly was in the tea itself, but she imagines herself here, right? At the edge of the saucer, somewhere here. So people are having tea in these beautiful cups and saucers, and she's like a fly on the saucer, insignificant and inconvenience, right? Somewhere where she doesn't belong. She doesn't deserve to be there, right? So Mabel imagines herself as a fly trapped in a saucer full of milk. The fly struggles to crawl out, but its wings are stuck together, making escape difficult. She compares herself to this helpless fly because she feels awkward, insignificant, and trapped by her own fears and insecurities. Nobody has said anything to her at the party. Nobody, no one. She's the one who's torturing herself. When she sees herself as a weak fly struggling to survive, she imagines other guests as beautiful butterflies and dragonflies who are graceful and confident. This image reflects her deep inferiority complex and loneliness at the party. She thinks that all of them are better than me. I do not belong here. These are people of a different class. I do not belong. I am a nobody. I am nothing. She calls herself nothing and nobody so many times. So this shows her deep inferiority complex, right? There are a few other characters mentioned in the story. Discuss the way their reactions help us to understand the inferiority complex of Mabel. So there are, when Mrs. What's the name of that lady? You see, when she comes to the party, Roshaw compliments her. But Mabel thinks that she's making fun of me. She's being sarcastic. Charles Burt says she has a new dress, but she thinks he's mocking her. He's making fun of her. He just says, new dress. And she thinks, oh, he's making fun of me. Mrs. Holman is busy talking about her family problems. Her child has a swollen knee, her son, something happened to her son, all the tragedies that they've been having in the family, scarlet fever. And yet Mabel is thinking about herself. She's like, why is she not talking about me? Why is she not noticing my dress? So she's feeling, if somebody talks about her dress, she has a problem. If somebody doesn't talk about her dress, she has a problem. So what do people do? Right? Mrs. Dolway, she herself says is very kind. But to her also, with her also, Mabel is very uncomfortable. Mrs. Dolway is kind enough to invite her to the party, but Mabel doesn't feel like she belongs there, right? And these reactions show that Mabel's suffering comes mainly from her own negative thoughts than the actual behavior of others. None of these people have done anything to make her feel the way she does. So it is all in her own mind. That is the stream of consciousness writing that Virginia Woolf has used in this particular novel, right? Okay. This is our next question. Pick out the sentences from the story which describe the ambience of the party. So, how are the rooms decorated? How are the sofas? What is on the walls? The mirrors on the walls, the blue sofas, and all the sentences that talk about Mrs. Dolway's house, we can write here. Here are some of these. She says she walked straight to the far end of the room to a shaded corner where a looking glass hung. So there was a looking glass. Then these people are talking away to glory. So these are all images that show a fashionable social gathering of well-dressed people and lively conversations. So people are talking, chattering, having fun, and they're dressed in nice clothes and they're enjoying themselves. That's the ambience of the party. So that's how people are behaving each other. That's how the setting, the place, the atmosphere, right? Ambience, ambience is वातावरण. तो वातावरण इन सब चीजों से बनता है, right? Mabel is thinking too much of her dress. Propose 5 sentences supporting the above statement. Mabel is only thinking about her dress. She's not thinking about anything else. Right? When Mrs. Holman is talking about her family, she's thinking about her dress. When Charles Burt is just complimented, she has a new dress, she's thinking about her dress. Rosha compliments her, she's still thinking negatively. So 5 sentences which show us that Mabel is thinking too much of her dress. She constantly worries that her dress looks old-fashioned. She looks repeatedly in the mirror and criticizes her appearance. She imagines that everyone in the party is talking about her dress and judging her dress. She interprets ordinary comments as criticism of her clothes. People are making ordinary comments and she thinks The comments are about her dress. Her thoughts throughout the party revolve around her yellow dress rather than the people or events around her. So when we read the story, we realize all she can think of is the dress. She's not thinking of other people, the food, what other people are wearing. All she's obsessed is with her own dress. Right? Okay. Now, this is interesting. Critically analyze Mabel's weak economic conditions in the past as one of the reasons that led her to choose an old-fashioned dress. So, she grew up in a family with limited needs, and in all her childhood, they were constantly trying to save money. And because she could not afford fashionable clothes, she started disliking modern fashion, and she chose an old-fashioned style from her mother's fashion book. So because she felt that modern fashion is expensive and waste of money, she chose an old-fashioned styled gown. And because the people that she's spending time with are richer, wealthier, they are financially better off, that makes her feel low in confidence. So her poor financial condition, it influenced her choice of dress. That's why she chose an old-fashioned dress. And because her dress was old-fashioned and other people were wearing modern dresses, she felt insecure and inferiority complex as a result of that. Right? Now, this is interesting. The cause of Miss Maple's disappointment is not only her poor background in the past, but her excessive bookishness. That means because she reads a lot, she makes up a lot in her mind based on what she has read. Actually, in life, people don't necessarily think and behave the way she thinks they do. Right? Let's listen to the translation of this question.
मिस मेबेलच्या निराशेचे कारण केवळ तिची भूतकाळातील गरीब पार्श्वभूमीच नाही, तर तिचा अति पुस्तकवेडेपणा देखील आहे. सिद्ध करा.
Right? So basically what he's saying is, she has not seen much of real life. She has only she's seen the world through books and imagination. So she imagines a lot of stuff. That is why her mind is racing even in the party. She keeps imagining this person is saying this person is thinking this, he's making fun of me, he's not saying it, but this is what he's thinking. So she's trying to get into people's head. So because she's a reader, her imagination is very rich. So her poor background and her excessive bookishness. That means people who try and live out of books and have very little touch with reality. That is what bookishness here means. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't read books. It just means that some people live too much in books and not in real life. It's important to have a balance of both. Do you appreciate Mabel's tendency of deciding her own value from the comments given by others? Explain your views. So you can write your views whether she was right in behaving the way she did. Right? It's like if somebody compliments me, I'm looking nice. If they don't compliment me, I'm not looking good. So that's not a good idea. She should know that she's wearing a pretty dress and she's looking nice, and she would be happy to receive a compliment. But if people don't compliment her, it's all right. I know I'm looking good, right? So self-respect and self-confidence have to come from within. When you stand in front of the mirror, you should know that, yeah, I look good. I may not look very pretty, but I look presentable. and other people's opinion will not bother me. So it's important to base your own value on personal qualities and your understanding of yourself rather than public opinion. Right? So, but she does think of herself as nothing and nobody. So you can understand where she's coming from. Okay. Now here are some synonyms for the word dress. So there's attire, there's garb, there's costume, there's garment, there's outfit, and there's apparel. You see these words on lots of cloth shops for clothes, right? So these are all synonyms for dress. So there are some more questions. The correct form of the verb and meaning of the two words according to the dictionary. You can do that. There's a choice of verbs here. You can fill in the blanks using the correct answer and then do as directed. Lata will sing tonight. Make it less certain. Lata may sing tonight. Show ability. You should wear your uniform. Ability is you can wear your uniform. Right? So you can rewrite these sentences, frame through 3 rules for your college, 3 sentences giving advice to your younger brother. Advice can be using should. Okay? You should do this. You should have breakfast in the morning. You should play for an hour every day. You should sleep on time. So you can give advice using should. Okay? So the class is over. There are a few more grammar questions. You can read these books in the library. You can find out more information about these careers, right? And there is this creative writing that you can engage in, right? Clothes mean nothing till someone lives in them. So clothes hanging on a hanger have no personality, but when somebody wears them, they come alive. They have a personality. So you can write about it. So these are some interesting questions. After the class, I'll share this resource with you, which has all the answers to the questions we discussed. Also the ice-breaking activities questions and the new words in the text, the word, Hindi meaning, Marathi meaning, and an example sentence. Okay. So you have all of these, and there is also, you'll also find the summary of this chapter because it's a long chapter. I'll also give you this. Here you see, there is the summary of this chapter at the end of the resource. Okay. This is in very short so that you don't have to read the entire chapter again. Okay. It'll be shared with you at the end of the class. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, bete.
Bye, ma'am.